Something is about to set, like concrete that has been poured and is still workable, still possible to shape, still possible to smooth, still possible to correct the imperfections before the hardening makes them permanent. Right now, in the hours of April 7th, the cycle that began with the Aries new moon on March 29th is in the last window of genuine malleability before its first half locks into the pattern that will carry through to the full moon. The decisions made, the directions chosen, the adjustments either made or deferred, all of it is still adjustable today. In a way, it will not be adjustable a week from now when the cycle's first half has fully established its character. That is the urgency of today, not the dramatic urgency of a new moon or a major planetary event. The quiet, specific, time-limited urgency of a window that is still open but will not be open much longer. The kind of urgency that is easiest to miss because it doesn't feel like urgency, it feels like an ordinary day. Which is exactly why the people who don't understand what April 7th represents will let it pass like any other day in the developing arc of a month. And the people who do understand will use it to make the specific, small, still possible adjustment that prevents a correctable imperfection from becoming a locked-in pattern. You know what the adjustment is. You have known since the first quarter moon revealed it 3 days ago. The direction you're moving in is largely right. The Aries new moon's initiation was genuine. The commitment is real. But something in the specific form of how you're moving is slightly off. A conversation that needs a small correction before it calcifies into a dynamic that will take much more to change. A decision that is mostly right, but has one aspect that the first quarter moon's friction was pointing toward with unusual precision. A relationship dynamic that has been running in a slightly familiar pattern despite the new cycle's intent to do something different, and that can still be redirected today with relatively minor adjustment. But that will require significantly more effort to redirect next week when it has had another week to establish itself. Today is the day for those small, precise, still possible corrections, and the window for them is measured in hours. The cycle that began at the Aries new moon has been doing what cycles in Aries always do in their first week, moving fast. Aries doesn't pause to check its work. It initiates, it advances, it covers ground with the specific kind of decisive forward energy that the first sign of the zodiac specializes in. And the extraordinary foundation this particular Aries cycle was launched from, the retrograde's preparation, the Pisces new moon's clearing, the convergence of March 20th, gave that forward energy an unusually deep and solid base. But fast doesn't mean perfect. Fast means that the first days of the cycle generated real momentum in a direction that was genuinely chosen, and the momentum has been carrying things forward at the pace that Aries momentum operates, which is to say, faster than you might have had time to evaluate every specific choice along the way. The conversation that advanced quickly. The decision that was made with Aries confidence. The pattern of engagement with the new direction that established itself in the first few days without necessarily being examined at the level of detail that the retrograde's more careful interior work was applying to things. Some of what has been established in the fast-moving first days of this cycle is exactly right. The direction, the essential commitment, the fundamental honesty of the beginning, those are solid. The first quarter moon's test confirmed that. But in the specific details of how the direction is being executed, in the texture of the conversations, the daily choices, the habitual responses that have been running alongside the new commitment, there are small misalignments. Places where the new direction and the old pattern are still running in the same channel, and where the old pattern is subtly shaping what the new direction produces without either of them being fully aware it's happening. Those small misalignments are correctable today. In a way, they won't be correctable next week. Not because the patterns will have become permanent next week. No pattern is truly permanent. But because the effort required to correct them increases significantly once they have been running for 2 weeks rather than 10 days. Once the cycle's first half has locked in a particular quality of momentum that carries those patterns as part of its structure rather than as correctable artifacts of the early days. Here is what the feeling of April 7th tends to be in the specific quality of its energy, for the people who are paying close enough attention to notice it. A subtle sense that something is being decided, even though nothing external has changed dramatically. A slight urgency that doesn't attach clearly to any specific external circumstance. A feeling that something important is in motion, and that your engagement with it right now matters in a way that is slightly out of proportion to the apparent significance of the ordinary choices of an ordinary day. That feeling is accurate. It is the felt reality of the cycle entering its last window of genuine adjustment before the first half's pattern locks. And the reason it doesn't attach clearly to any specific external circumstance is that the adjustment needed is not a dramatic external change. It is a precise, targeted, relatively small correction to something specific in the way the new direction has been taking shape. Something that is not yet a problem, not yet a crisis, not yet generating the kind of obvious friction that demands immediate attention. It is something that is still in the category of this could be better, rather than this is going wrong. The challenge of the April 7th window is that the human tendency is to wait for the "this is going wrong" signal before making corrections. To let the thing that is merely "this could be better" continue until it accumulates enough evidence of wrongness to feel like a legitimate reason to intervene. And by the time it reaches that level of evidence, the correction is no longer small and precise. It is major and disruptive, requiring significant energy and effort to accomplish what would have required only a modest adjustment today. The window to make the small, precise, still quiet correction is today, and accessing it requires the willingness to make corrections before they feel urgently necessary, before the friction is loud enough to be undeniable, before the misalignment has accumulated enough evidence to make the adjustment feel obviously justified to anyone who might be watching. There are three specific areas where the April 7th adjustment window tends to be most productively applied, and examining each of them honestly against your own circumstances will likely reveal which one is most relevant to your specific situation right now. The first is a conversation that needs a small but meaningful correction before it establishes its character. In the first 10 days of the Aries new moon cycle, conversations relevant to the new direction have been advancing with the Aries momentum, moving forward, covering ground, initiating exchanges that the retrograde was creating the conditions for. But Aries momentum in conversation can produce exchanges that are more decisive than accurate, that establish a particular dynamic, the tone of the relationship, the understanding between the people, the unspoken agreement about what will and won't be discussed, before either person has fully examined whether that dynamic is actually what they want. If there is a conversation relevant to your new direction where a small correction to the dynamic would make it significantly more aligned with what you actually intend, a small clarification, a slight reorientation of how something was communicated, an honest addition that would make the exchange more complete, today is the day for it. Before the dynamic of that conversation has another week to establish itself as the pattern the relationship will run in through the rest of the cycle. The second area is a decision where one specific aspect needs adjustment. The decision itself may be right, the essential direction, the fundamental commitment. But in making it, something was slightly misweighted. A consideration that deserved more attention got less. An implication that was apparent but inconvenient to address was left unaddressed. An assumption was made that the first quarter moon's friction was quietly questioning without quite making the question explicit. If there is a decision that fits that description, essentially right, but with one aspect that would benefit from adjustment, today is the day to revisit that aspect specifically, not to reverse the decision, to refine it, to bring the one thing that was slightly misweighted back into honest alignment with the full truth of what the direction requires. The third area is a pattern in yourself, not a dramatic old pattern. The retrograde and the Pisces new moon and the first quarter moon have all been doing work on the larger patterns. Something more subtle, a habitual response that has been running alongside the new commitment without quite being identified as something that needs adjustment. The slight avoidance in how you're engaging with the most challenging aspect of the new direction. The familiar management of a specific kind of discomfort that the direction is generating. The small but consistent way in which the new commitment is being honored in its broad strokes, while one specific dimension of it is still being handled by the old pattern. That small pattern adjustment, made today with the honest precision of a small correction rather than the drama of a major change, is more effective than the larger work that the same pattern will require once it has had another week to establish itself in the new cycle's context. The twist in this story, and it is the twist that makes April 7th more than simply a day for catching up on unfinished business, is that small corrections made at the right moment in a cycle produce effects that are disproportionate to their size. This is the fundamental dynamic of leverage applied to the development of a lunar cycle. Early in the cycle's arc, before the first half has locked, a small adjustment can redirect the entire trajectory of what the cycle produces. The concrete is still workable. The momentum is still settable. The pattern is still malleable. A small correction to the angle of the direction can, over the following weeks and months of the cycle, produce an outcome that is measurably different from what the uncorrected direction would have produced, even though the correction itself required relatively modest effort. Later in the cycle, after the first half has locked, after the full moon has revealed what the cycle has produced and the second half has begun, the same correction requires significantly more effort and produces proportionally smaller effect. The concrete has set. The momentum is established. The pattern is running. Changing it now requires working against the established momentum rather than simply redirecting it while it is still in formation. This is why April 7th matters. Not because the day is inherently more powerful than other days, because it is the last day in which the leverage available for small corrections is at the high end of its range. After today, the cycle's first half begins to establish its final character. The adjustments become corrections rather than refinements. The work of changing the pattern increases from modest to significant. The window for the precise, still small, high-leverage correction is today. Here is the practical guide to using April 7th's window well, offered as directly as possible because the subtlety of the adjustment available doesn't benefit from elaborate framing. Identify the one thing in the current cycle that is slightly off. Not dramatically wrong, that would have already demanded attention. Slightly off. The thing that the quiet part of your awareness has been noting without the louder part of your awareness making it a priority. The thing that, if asked honestly, you would acknowledge could be better, more aligned with the genuine intention of the Aries new moon's direction, more honest with the person or situation it involves, more consistent with the self-knowledge the retrograde produced rather than with the comfortable old pattern that has been running alongside the new commitment. Now ask yourself, what is the smallest, most specific, most precisely targeted adjustment that would bring it into better alignment? Not the full resolution, not the complete correction, the smallest next thing that would move it meaningfully in the right direction. And then do that thing today, in the hours still available in April 7th, while the concrete is still workable, while the adjustment is still small, while the leverage is still high and the correction will travel further and cost less than the same correction made next week. This does not require a dramatic act. The most effective April 7th corrections are quiet and precise, a message that adds one honest clarification to a conversation that had been running on slightly incomplete terms. A specific small decision that addresses the one aspect of a larger decision that was slightly misweighted. A moment of honest internal acknowledgement about the small pattern that has been running alongside the new commitment, followed by one concrete action that expresses the adjusted version of the pattern rather than the old default. Small. Precise. Today. Before the window closes. By the end of this week, the first half of the Aries new moon cycle will have established its character. The full moon is approaching. It will arrive in the second week of April and reveal what the first half of the cycle produced. What it reveals will be directly shaped by everything that happened in the first 10 days. The new moon's initiation, the first quarter moon's test, and the quality of the post-test adjustment period that April 6th and 7th represent. The people who use today's window, who make the small, precise correction to whatever in the cycle's first days is slightly off, will arrive at the full moon with a first half that has been tended with unusual care. The seeds planted at the Aries new moon will have been not just initiated and tested, but adjusted with the intelligence of what the first 10 days revealed. The direction will be slightly more accurately fitted to the terrain. The commitment will be slightly more honestly calibrated. The outcome that the full moon reveals will reflect all of that care. The people who let today pass without the small correction, who wait until the pattern has become more obviously problematic before addressing it, who defer the adjustment to a time when the urgency feels more proportionate to the effort, will arrive at the full moon with a first half that shows the accumulated effect of the small misalignment left uncorrected. Not necessarily dramatically, but in the specific way that small uncorrected misalignments always show their effects when revealed by the honest light of the full moon, as the gap between what was intended and what was produced slightly larger than it needed to be. Today is the day that gap can be minimized, not eliminated. The full moon will reveal something about every cycle, and no first half is without its imperfections, but minimized with the honest precision of a small correction made while the correction is still small. The window is open right now, in the hours of April 7th, before the day closes and the first half of the cycle enters its final form. You know what the small correction is. You have known since the first quarter moon's friction pointed toward it. The quiet awareness that has been noting it without making it a priority needs to be given priority today, in the specific, concrete, smallest possible form that brings it back into honest alignment. Make the correction today, while the leverage is high and the effort is low and the concrete is still workable. Because the window that is open right now, the window that makes a small correction possible before it becomes a large one, closes tonight. And what the cycle carries into its second week will be the version of the direction that today's choices produce. Make it the best version available. While there is still time to do so, the window is open. Use it.